Greetings, everybody. Welcome to G4G on YouTube. I'm Napalm Dawn. Be nice if I can say my own tag. So today's video is a little bit of a talkie. It is a formulation of ideas or a discussion that has been kind of brewing in my head over the last couple days, and I wanted to get it out to you guys on YouTube and have this discussion with you and go through what I think about this situation and kind of see down in the comments what you feel about it. If you agree, what are your alternatives to it? And it's something that I wanted to do on YouTube more than on the stream, because I wanted it to be a kind of a little bit more prep than the stream. By the way, this Friday, which will be March 19th, it will be the last time that I'm streaming on Twitch for quite some time, thanks to a new job. So what I plan to do for that particular stream is unlock all the characters in Redux Beta 2 and take viewer requests of the team-ups and also viewer requests for the gear. So provided the gear is a direct damaging piece of gear and not a multifunction or a buff debuff kind of a thing, so like the cube or the weather control device is out, but things like Blade of the Guardian would be in, things that do direct damage. So at 3 o'clock Eastern Time on Friday, 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, I'm going to have the last Redux stream for quite some time, or the last Marvel hour really, and I will be doing viewer requests. So if you've got a team that you want to do, just come over to my Twitch channel, and of course the link is always down in the description, and just stop by on Friday the 19th and we will do that. So I'll do the teams that you guys want to do, and that'll be the last stream for a while, so that'll be kind of a big deal. Whether I get a chance to do it on the weekends, I don't know. I might fall back on more YouTube content than the stream. So anyway, what you see on the screen here are the Infinity Stones of the MCU. Space Stone in blue, Mind Stone in yellow, Reality Stone red, Power Stone purple, Time Stone green, Soul Stone orange. And the thing that I want to talk to you guys about today is Captain America putting the stones back where they came from, and alternatively, at the end of the video, what did he do in the past? Like when he didn't come home and take the time portal back to 2023, where maybe in the time stream did he go, and the challenges that presents, because that is a whole other option. In all honesty, in my opinion, I think you could absolutely do potentially a movie, Captain Time, or maybe a Disney episode, Disney episodes on Disney Plus. There's 6 stones, so that's 6 episodes. And then maybe 2 more dedicated to some other things going on, like after he's done with the stones. But there are some issues that I have in him returning the stones exactly where they came from. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss them kind of in order from easiest to hardest, or a clump of easies and then a clump of hards. I don't necessarily know I can really scale it 1 to 6, but here we go. The Space Stone. We know they try to get the Space Stone from 2012. Right over here, that's where the Space Stone originally was. They screw up, by the way, my art is lovely. If I was actually like good at art and animation, this would be an animated video and be great, but yeah, I'm not. So 2023, this is where everything is. This is where Cap takes off from. Now, the Space Stone, we know that when it comes to the Space Stone, they originally tried to get it in 2012, and they failed because the Tesseract fell on the ground, Loki grabbed it, and portaled out. That's what the Space Stone does. So what they had to do is they had to get it back here in the 70s from Hank Pym's lab. I think for Cap or Steve to return this to the 70s, it'd be really easy. He just gets there, he sneaks on base, kind of like his modern timeline iteration does, and he just waits behind a corner or some equipment. He watches Tony take the Tesseract out, put it in the suitcase, and walk away with it. Once Tony and Howard are distracted, we know that, like, Pym is not on the way back. There's nobody else there. Boom, Tesseract back in the machine. Space Stone is done. There's literally no issues with this one. I think this is the absolute simplest one of the entire bunch. It's just that easy because they just grab it. Now, obviously, in Endgame, it was a little screwed up getting it in 2012. However, this makes a much, much easier exchange. Here in the 1970s, it makes it dead-ass simple. So now we're going to talk about the Power Stone, which came from 2014. The Power Stone, of course, is the purple one, and that is the one that was in the orb in the temple, the Power Stone. And Nebula and War Machine try to get it. War Machine's like, wait a minute, there might be some Indiana Jones shit going on over here. Nebula reaches in the force field, grabs the orb, and that's where the Power Stone is. This one has some issues with it. Some. But it's not the worst. So what they do is they knock Quill out, and they take essentially a lockpick from Quill so that they can get into the temple. Well, the problem there is, how does Steve exactly return this one? This picture is a great example of it. So here's what Cap is going to have to do to not disrupt 2014 and the Power Stone. He's going to have to get there, and he's going to have to, again, hide around some corners and probably get there a little bit ahead of the game. When War Machine and Nebula are still there, he's going to have to wait until Nebula goes away and everything. Hopefully Quill is still out. Like, we really don't know what Quill is doing while Nebula is short-circuiting and trying to call everybody and get sucked back up into the tractor beam and everything. So hopefully Quill is still out. If Quill is still out, then what he needs to do is he needs to run into the temple, and somehow he needs to get the stone back in the force field. But here's the problem. It's not the stone that's in the force field, it's the orb. In the end of Endgame, we see the stones in a suitcase in their own separate sections. We don't see the orb. So here's the problem with the Power Stone. First, Cap is going to have to get an orb around that thing. Where is he going to get that orb from? Secondly, he needs to get it back in this force field protected area. How is he going to do it? Finally, he needs to do this all while Quill is still knocked out, run out of the temple, lock it, and put the tools back on Quill. Quill wakes up with a huge headache, doesn't know what the hell is going on, and you gotta hope that he goes back into the temple doing what he's supposed to do and doesn't go, oh man, something just knocked me the fuck out. I'm getting the hell out of here. Like, this is some trash. This one, actually, now that I think about it, actually gets a little bit more sketchy than I thought. I thought it was really just going to be the tools, the force field, and the orb, but getting knocked out might change Star-Lord's whole take on the thing. So that's an X factor over there. So now, the next easiest one, in my opinion, is the Time Stone. Because the Time Stone, we are giving back to somebody who kind of knows what's going on. That's back here in 2012. Cap would just go to 2012, wait a little bit for Hulk to leave the roof, and then go back up to the roof and give it to Ancient One, who kind of knows somewhat what's going on. So this is a person that's going to be expecting this. However, here's an issue. By returning it to Ancient One, that proves that there was a plan that was successful. If she knows that there is a successful plan, how will that change how she interacts with Doctor Strange? She has already foreseen some of it because she's like, Doctor Strange was supposed to be the best of us. But Hulk throws a monkey wrench in there. He's like, well, he gave the stone away. And she's like, well, then there had to be a reason for it. So Ancient One is literally going to be cursed with knowledge. She's going to have to bide her time until she meets Doctor Strange. And knowing full well that Doctor Strange is going to be the hero and everything, she still needs to treat him exactly the way she treated him in the Doctor Strange movie. She can't cut him any slack going, well, this guy's, it's going to be magical Jesus. This is, I know everything's going to be okay because the stone came back and everything. Even if Cap doesn't say anything, just is like, palms it back on Ancient One and then takes off, Ancient One is going to know. Thanks to foresight, thanks to the curse of knowledge and everything like that. So Time Stone is physically easy to do. It repairs, all the offshoots that she talked about and everything. But it still changes potentially how Ancient One deals with Doctor Strange. And it's going to make her literally sit around and twiddle her thumbs until Doctor Strange comes into the picture. And she's going to have to make sure that she doesn't sit there and give anything away or over prep him or be like, you are going to be magical Jesus. And maybe that'll feed his ego. It's this one is going to be kind of interesting to see how it would play out. But I think it's a little bit more boring than the Power Stone. I think the Power Stone really has several X factors opening up in it here that I didn't originally think of. So now that's the first three. So now we've dealt with kind of some three easy ones. Let's deal with some of the three harder ones. The Soul Stone. That was another one from 2014. The Soul Stone over here, I think, really has a giant lot of question marks about it because how is this going to get handled? First of all, if he's like, okay, I'm going to get there right after Hawkeye gets teleported back through time. If he gets there so quickly, will he see a dead Natasha on the ground? He's going to have to deal with Red Skull. How's that going to go? I mean, these two are not exactly about ready to go down to Das Bierdenhausen and knock back a bunch of Red Skull Wisers over here. This is going to be a potentially dicey meeting. I would imagine at this point Red Skull is kind of calm and is not going to bear any ill will. And I would imagine Cap is mature and stable enough to not decide to start throwing shields with Red Skull, his old adversary. But it could make for an interesting exchange. Secondly, what if Red Skull is there sort of as a genie in the bottle? The stone leaves way earlier than it originally intended. So obviously the original path of the stone was to be picked up by Thanos when he sacrifices Gamora in the future. 2018. So Red Skull originally on the timeline was there that whole time, right up here to about 2018. He didn't disappear in 2014 or do anything because that wasn't the timeline. So when the Avengers go back in the past in 2023 to 2014 and they get the stone here, what if that releases Red Skull from servitude? This loop might actually now be wide fucking open. Because if Red Skull's like, well, I don't have any reason to be here anymore. I'm not protecting anything. I'm not guarding anything. I'm not the question mark World of Warcraft Warcraft quest giver about the stone over here. I'm free. Genie out of the bottle. Thank you, Christina Aguilera. Goodbye. What's Cap gonna do? Is he just gonna put the stone on the ground and get out of there? Like, this is a major X factor right here. This is a huge question mark, as we don't know what will happen to Red Skull. Because we never see Red Skull anytime after a stone is picked up over there. We don't see him in 2018 or 2014. That leaves us really wondering, does anybody mine the fort? And if nobody's minding the fort now, you now have this split from 2014 where nobody's guarding the Soul Stone, and then what? Do you just leave it there? And what if somebody hears about it and just goes and picks it up and doesn't have to make the sacrifice? This is really big and could potentially be a major offshoot plot. You could go the very basic way and say, well, you know, because of the Tesseract, Red Skull is there, he got portaled there, he's stuck for fucking ever, and all Cap is going to do is just hand it back and be like, yeah, sorry you fell in that portal, and he's going to be, thank you, Liebchen, and just go float away. And then go act on The Walking Dead, because that's who it is. So, yeah, this is really big to have what happens here with the Soul Stone 2014. Now, the Reality Stone. The red one. So the Reality Stone is 2013 Asgard. And that is when Rocket and Thor go back to 2013. This is another big one. Again, like the Power Orb, which was in... or the Power Stone, which was in an orb. The Reality Stone was a mass of ether. It essentially was a non-distilled amoeba floating around in Jane Foster or J-Thor. And then Rocket extracts it from her and condenses it into the stone. So what is Cap going to do to get this one back to its place? So you can't just hand the stone to Jane and be like, go about your business. You have to sneak in after all of the commotion that Thor and Rocket caused and the Dark Elves attacking and inject it back into Jane, except it's a stone at this point. Somebody has to convert that back into the amorphous blob of the ether and get it back in its liquid form so it goes back into her cellular structure. How are they going to do that? Again, we didn't see anything in the suitcase, at least not that I can recall, that looked like Cap would be equipped to do that one, similar to how he would be ill-equipped for the Space Stone. So this one is another big factor. How do you get it back in its liquid form, back into Jane? And how does her day not get convoluted because people are randomly sticking ugly-ass needles in her? I mean, what Rocket had in his hand didn't look great. So what's that going to do to Jane's day? And how is Cap going to manipulate and maneuver everything on that day with the Dark Elves attacking? I mean, sure, you could time it to get there right after Thor, and maybe you're not dealing with the Dark Elves, but you're certainly dealing with a palace that's on alert because of Rocket. And yeah, we absolutely have to bring Mjolnir back to that. Otherwise, how the hell is Thor going to help defend against the Dark Elves and do Thor 2 at that point? So, Thor Dark World, Thor needs his hammer, so he has to bring the hammer back, somehow get it to regular Thor, who might have just been sitting around eating breakfast, slamming a mug of meat on the table, when all of a sudden Mjolnir just fucking takes off. He's like, whoa, wait a minute, because Fat Thor is over there, calls for Mjolnir, takes it, and he's like, oh, I'm still worthy, and he portals out with it. Cap has to do two time-consuming things at the same time. You got to get Mjolnir back to Thor, and who knows exactly where he is at that moment. And you've got to get the ether, which doesn't exist right now, it's in its stone form, back into Jane. That one's dicey. Because how do you get Mjolnir back to Thor and not have Thor go, Cap, what the hell are you doing here? And Cap's like, you didn't see me. I'm not here. Here's your hammer back. Don't worry about how I'm holding it. We'll talk about that later. Goodbye. And then slap the GPS wrist. I mean, this one is really, really interesting. And I think the worst could potentially... Actually, I don't know even what is the worst now that I talk about some of these out loud. The Mind Stone is also going to be pretty dicey. And this is really the one that got me thinking about it. It's the thought of how does he return the Mind Stone that really created the most amount of thinking for me. And then that's how I got into this whole plot. So the Mind Stone is 2012. We know the mind, time, and space, they all tried to get out of 2012. Well, the mind can go back to 2012. How they get the mind is that Cap goes in the elevator with what would eventually be part of the Hydra, Shield Hydra, and says, I'm going to run point on the staff. And they're like, well, we don't know if we can give it to you. He's like, Hail Hydra. So he walks off without it. He walks He walks out of the elevator with it, leaving Shield and Hydra not to have it. So eventually, Crossbone, Secretary, they're all going to get downstairs, and they're not going to have the staff. And that's how the plot would go from there. So Cap has to get back over there, and now there's going to be 3 Caps. This is where this really gets interesting. You're going to have 2012 Cap, you're going to have 2023 Cap, and then you're going to have 2023 Cap Part 2. All hanging around over there. How does he get this back to Hydra Shield? Does he just go down to the lobby, hope that nobody sees him, and wait for that door to open and give it back to Hydra Shield and say, never mind, you guys do it? Because they have to have this. This eventually goes, from what I know, stays with Shield Hydra. It gets stolen by an assistant and brought over to Baron Strucker ahead of Age of Ultron. And that's how it flows from Age of Ultron into Vision, so on and so forth. And that's how it gets back to the Avengers. You absolutely have to have that go off, otherwise you don't have Vision. So, how does Cap get this back to Hydra Shield? Does he hopefully go down like a floor in Stark Tower and say, he took it from them at floor 9? Does he hit the button and hope to stop the elevator at floor 8 and then just hand it back to them? And go, yeah, never mind. He has to make sure he has the same outfit on, so there's going to be 3 nearly identical Caps running around that hopefully they don't run into each other. Maybe push a button on the floor, and as soon as the door opens, just out of sight, like skid it down the hallway. And really interesting to see how this one goes back, because a lot of these, they go back into scenarios, not people. Ancient One gets the Time Stone. That one's direct. We're going to hope Quill is still passed out for the Power Stone. He wouldn't know the difference. Soul Stone is a giant question mark. Space is super easy. Reality, another sketchy one. But the Mind Stone, I think, is one of the most interesting stories out of all of this. Because it's going to be so... Hydra Shield's going to be so confused. They had their hands on it. Cap gets it back. Kind of gives them the secret password to the clubhouse up in the tree. And then he gives it back. All in the amount of time that hopefully nobody makes it down to the lobby with third Cap running around. Everybody's like, what the hell? Like, aren't you upstairs? Or, yeah, that one's going to be really weird. And that one goes back over here to 2012. So now that we've talked about the Stones, let's actually talk about Cap himself in all of this. We don't fully know where does he go back to be with Peggy. Probably he goes back here somewhere in the 50s. Most likely due to the vehicle that we've seen. You can't exactly say the music because you don't always listen to music only the year that it comes out. That could just be their song or their wedding song and they're dancing to it 10 years later because it's their song. But based on the model of the cars, I think if you went back and froze it, you might, if you saw like a Packard there or something, you could probably gauge by the cars that it would be maybe the early 50s. We're not seeing cars that look like 56 Chevys, 57 Chevys and everything. They're more clunky than that. So I'm going to guess he's going back to the 50s. There's a lot of explaining to do at this part. If Peggy thinks he's gone into the water with the plane, he's going to have to explain himself like, oh, I got out. He's either got to lie and say, oh, I got out. I got picked up by a whaling boat. Here I am. Happy day. And then she's going to be like, well, we got to tell everybody. Well, Cap is absent from this timeline from the 50s until he's unfrozen and everything. So Cap really can't exist. In this gap over here, pretty much, well, all right. This gap right over here, like from the beginning of the timeline to about, when he's unfrozen and everything, he can't exist. He can't be public. He can't be doing anything. So either he and Peggy need to live a life of secrecy, or he lies to her, or he tells her the truth, and then they're both in on it together. You probably can't really putz around America too well as Captain America, who saw the country saw his wartime stories and everything. He was a propaganda piece. He was like a USO poster boy. So he's going to be kind of visible if he's out and about. He's going to be like Superman walking around, not as Clark Kent. So he may have to just be constantly disguised. And would Cap be able to resist everything that happens after he would have went into the ice? All the wars, the Korean War, Vietnam. Would he be able to resist, like, not enlisting, go to those wars? If he does he go incognito and try and hope nobody recognizes him? He can never use the shield again. If he just lives a quiet life, what does he do? What does Cap do for a living? How do they ensure that Peggy stays on the right track that we see her doing in the 1970s when he sneaks into her office to avoid detection? He's going to know, well, we can't screw with the timeline, so it's not like they can say, oh, we'll go hide out in like Brazil or something like that. She has to stay in the States and continue this whole part of the timeline over here from the end to the 70s at the very least. We don't know when, well, we do know when Peggy gets old and dies, he visits her and then she's, okay, yeah, there's that. So she has to stay on the same path to when Cap visits her. That's an interesting plot point too. When she's sitting there dying and in the hospital, she's like, she has a moment of clarity, I guess, and is like, I kind of don't really remember this part exactly. The dementia still works. The dementia protects the plot because if Cap had been sitting there taking care of her the whole time and everything like that, even if he just saw her the previous day, the dementia would hold up and potentially she'd be in a bad spell. And then he comes in the next day as now unfrozen, normal timeline Steve, and he walks in to see her for the first time in a while, and the dementia will protect the plot because that's what happens to a dementia mind. But if they didn't have that moment and she was just maybe sick in a nursing home and didn't have dementia, and she's like, oh God, it's Catwick, I can't believe it's you, then that wrecks the idea that they'd been spending all this time together. And again, he says, no, not really going to tell you what it's up. So maybe he spent a limited time with her and then took off. That's another possibility, and that makes some of this explanation easier. If he just hangs out with her for a little while and then says, well, I'm not like really supposed to be here, he goes into hiding and leaves Peggy alone and doesn't drag Peggy down with him, and then Peggy resumes her normal course. But the problem is, why would he do that? He stayed out of coming back to 2023 so he could have a life. Do we honestly think Cap is going to go back in time, spend a limited time with Peggy, leave her alone, and then just dick around until time comes for him to appear by the lake in 2023? That's like the whole reason why he stays. Is he really going to have that fortitude to just hang out a little while and then do what? So this could honestly make for either an interesting Cap in Time movie, or a series that explains what he does when he takes each of these stones back. Maybe they'd be like an episode each or something. And then what does Cap do when he doesn't go back to 2023 and he goes and probably stays in the 50s? What does he do up until then? Because there's no way he can be public. We just have to agree on that. If he does go public and acts like Captain America, this is now a whole brand new timeline. And then there's no reason to look for him. And then there's no reason to thaw him out. And then he's not part of the original Avengers initiative. And then all of this gets screwed up. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions on what happens with Cap's life in that time. And you can't even say it's like he lived a little bit of a life and then came back aged a little bit later. Like, he doesn't go back to the portal pad. He just takes an Uber in 2023 and is like, thanks, see you later, and gets out and sits by the lake while they do their shit until, like, oh, they'll recognize me. And he's like, okay, I'm old, here's the shield, take up the mantle. Maybe Falcon and the Winter Soldier will deal with some of that. It'll be interesting, but I'm really, really curious as to what Cap could possibly be doing with his life from the 50s. I mean, that's going to be that's going to be really, really crazy at that point. And then you gotta bank that the soldier serum is giving him a good amount of longevity there, because that is a long life to be of adult age at that point in the early 50s and everything, and then make it 50 years up, and then another 23 years into 2023. That is a lot of time. So I'm really curious. What do you guys think about this one? What do you think about each of these stone situations that we talked about? Again, I don't think we saw a needle, which would fix the reality stone over here. I didn't see an orb, which would set up the Power Stone, how does Ancient One respond to somebody handing the stone back? What does that clue her into? And can she resist not changing how she deals with Doctor Strange and everything? The Space Stone is like the only one that makes like ridiculously easy sense. This one right here is the easiest and least impactful out of all of them, but the rest of them have some serious questions. Time Stone's kind of easy because you could probably trust Ancient One to just stick with the plan. She's cursed with knowledge. She has foresight. She knew about Doctor Strange before she even met him. So she knows what's going to happen over there, and this just maybe gives her a lot of confirmation. Power Stone is the orb issue, the force field. Will Quill decide to bail on like getting it? What's he gonna do? Waking up with a huge ass headache from being knocked out? The Soul Stone, what happens between Cap and Red Skull? Is Red Skull a genie in a bottle that's been let out since there's nothing there to wait around for? We know Cap doesn't get put in that place because he hangs out with Peggy Carter and then shows back up at the lake, so it's not like that traps him there. So this is a huge question mark. The Mind Stone is going to be really interesting to see how that works out with Hydra Shield. This one actually now is probably one of the more easy ones that I can think of. Originally, I thought the Mind Stone would be hard, but I think out of everything else, just handing it back to them and being like, yeah, never mind. You guys deal with it. And then Cap just walks away while they sit there dumbfounded. Like, what the fuck just happened? This one has less question marks than some of the others now, but I mean, Reality Stone is a chunk of rock. It's got to get back into a liquid and get re-injected to Jane in the middle of that crazy, chaotic day. Yeah, this could make for some interesting plot to see what happens, and it would be really neat to see if Marvel ever tackles that. Tackle Cap's journey, and then since this is kind of just 6 things and might be a little bit short, and you can't make that big of a story around this because this has to get back pretty much the instant that they left. Otherwise, things start deviating and you have different timelines. So it's you can't quantum leap it where it takes a day or two to resolve. Really, that would be a little sketchy. But what happens to Cap between probably here from the 50s all the way on up to 2023, all the while knowing he's a Cap and now there's another Cap out there, the one that they unfreeze? Can he resist defending his country in the wars? Maybe he kind of works a little bit secretly on the side, like help making sure the Avengers get together and sort of maybe aiding Nick Fury from the side a little bit, or incognito, continuing to push things along the way that they're supposed to. Maybe at least until the Avengers get together, and then be like, okay, I've put everybody on the right path here. I can just chill out for another 10 or so years until I gotta go sit by the lake and hand the shield over. But yeah, what do you guys think? And am I crazy for some of the thoughts that I've had on this? I'm really curious. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. I hope to see your responses down below. See ya.